Hi, my name is Chet Cheddar, and I'll be your host for A Closer Look, where we'll explore the most current and relevant topics covered in Frontline Initiative, which is a magazine produced by the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals in partnership with the University of Minnesota's Institute on Community Integration. If you're wondering what Frontline Initiative is all about, it's about the work that direct support professionals do on a day-to-day basis as they support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'll be talking to authors and taking a closer look at current practices, tools, and resources. So buckle up and let's hear what the authors have to say. Welcome, everybody. We're so excited to have our guests here today. The Frontline Initiative issue that we're talking about today was on supporting people as they age. And today we have three very special guests with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with you, David.
Okay, my name is David Liscombe. I have my own apartment over on Superior Street. It's part of Kelsey Creek Apartments. I've been there since 1993. I was in an IRA by JRC for about 10 years, and then I went into supportive apartments. And then I was finally ready to move on my own into my own apartment, and I really like it there.
I bet you do. What city do you live in?
Watertown, New York.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, will you go next, please?
Yep, my name is Michelle Leo. I live in Watertown, New York, and I am a staff development educator for the ARC Jefferson St. Lawrence. I worked here for almost 27 years.
Oh, just a little time. What do you do in that particular position?
I train new staff that come into our agency. I am a local admin for our eVag Academy through NADSP. I oversee the College of Direct Support, a little bit of everything, a lot of person-centered training.
Yeah, you do a lot of different things. What's your experience? Did you start as a DSP?
Yep, I started out as a DSP in at a residential site, and then I went to Dayhab, and I was in Dayhab for 16 years. And then I switched to staff development to do what I'm doing now.
Okay. Dayhab, dehabilitation and
Rehabilitation program, yep.
And what is that like for listeners who may not know?
It's a program that people we support attend Monday through Friday. While they're there, they do a lot of volunteer activities, Meals on Wheels, food pantry volunteering, whatever volunteering opportunity they're interested in, and some fun stuff also. Going out to like our parks and out to lunch, bowling.
Some fun activities out and about. Great, you've had quite the career. And then John, would you introduce yourself, please?
My name is John Leo, and I also work for the ARC Jefferson St. Lawrence. At our agency, my job title is Incident Management Coordinator, which is related to investigations and things. But I'm also the advisor of the local self-advocacy group, the North Country Self-Advocates. And I've worked for the agency for 25 years, and I've been the advisor of the self-advocacy group for 20 years.
Wow.
That's the best part of my job by far.
Much more fun than doing the detective work on different incidents that occur, but I'm sure you do a very good job with that too.
Thank you. Yes, I enjoy being the advisor of the North Country Self-Advocates. It's got me involved in the community through the people I support, and it's opened my eyes to a lot of barriers and things that adults with IDD face every hour of every day, and how to break those barriers down working as a group.
Yeah. Anything else you would tell us about the North Country Self-Advocate Group? Like how many members are there? What are some of the goals?
I'm going to let David start, and then I'll pick up. David, why don't you tell Chet about the origins of our group?
I started it in 1995. I had gone to a national self-advocacy meeting, and then I went with Steve Holmes, and I was on the New York State Self-Advocacy Association's Board of Directors, and I was their 10th president. And then I came back, and it was decided by Howie Danner, our director of the ARC, that I should be a self-advocacy liaison. And lo and behold, I ended up becoming a self-advocate. I'm trying to think of the right word, but I would have so much duties in the most important parts of it. And so I was under John Leo as the ambassador, if you will, to the board and to the agency. And my job was to file all the things that needed to be filed, write speeches, help advocates to better themselves, to feel good about themselves, that kind of thing. And so I was kind of the advocate liaison, and I had that for, what was it, 4 years, John?
4 or 5 years.
And then I retired. And the only reason I retired is because my heart doctor felt with my heart the way it was. I recovered from a heart attack, and I was getting weak. And so he felt I should retire 2 years early, so I did. But I have never given up on self-advocacy. It's something that I have a lot of enjoyment doing. I like talking to people like you. I like sharing information.
The North Country Self Advocates were founded by David and 4 of his friends in 1995. Now our membership is about 45 self advocates.
Right.
And we meet regularly, and David serves as an inspiration to everybody during the meetings.
Yeah, that sounds really great and a lot of hard work. But as you said, David, it's so important that the voice of self-advocates are heard.
I was the one that got rid of that R word. I worked under Governor Patterson also, and part-time, and I decided that R word ought to go. And so I have a picture on my wall of me signing the name change bill with him. And I really was inspired. But I think what was really important to me that day was that at the Capitol, when I went up to sign it, there was a guy standing next to me who had gone to school with me at Batavia, Chester Finn, and he now works for the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. And he doesn't want that word in there either. And he'll put his hands up over his head and clap his hands if he hears it. He said, I don't want to hear that word.
May I elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure.
Yeah, I know Chester, and I don't doubt that at all. He is a wonderful advocate.
So in New York State, in the state of New York, services for people with disabilities used to be funneled through the New York State Department of Health through something called the Office for Mental R and Developmental Disabilities. But that R word infuriated the self-advocates so much that they pressured the New York State government back in about 2012 to change the name from OMRDD to OPWDD, which stands for the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. But it took a state law to be enacted, and David's right. He and Chester and a couple other people were standing right next to Governor Patterson when Governor Patterson signed that bill into law. And it was a lot of hard work for the self-advocates around the state to push the state and to make them realize how offensive the R word was.
Yeah, and that wasn't that long ago that you did that, and I'm so grateful for you for doing it. I would love to see a I'd love to see a photo of that photo if you guys wouldn't mind sharing
I
it.
think I have one. I can send it to you. I think I
Okay.
took it the day that, I interviewed David. I took a picture of it on his wall.
Yeah, David's got, one, and I've got,
Yeah.
you still have it.
Yeah.
And Chester Finn's in that photo
Yeah,
also,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he is.
Oh, great. Thank
And,
you. Thanks for letting me know that, David. That is
yeah,
incredibly
is
important
that,
work.
It also inspired the disability awareness, which we have a day during the year that we actually celebrate that. And I'm finding now that with the information that I have, I feel like almost like a camera because I'm all over the place. And it's a good feeling. I know that one person asked me about 3 months ago, "Gee, David, aren't you alone?" I said, "No, I have a roommate." "Well, where? I don't see him." I said, "Look on my wall. My Lord Jesus is my strength, my salvation, my interest." And, I just feel like I'm illuminated. I don't have time to be lonely.
That's great. Before you retired, you were obviously very involved with advocacy, but I also heard that you were on the NADSP board of directors at some point.
Yes, I was for 5 years. I really enjoyed it on the NADSP. I found that it gave me a lot of information, but it also helped me with what I already knew to make it better. But then I got to the point where I wanted to make it better for other people and share it. And so this last year, I was the guest of Joe Macbeth, who's the executive director, and I had the best roommate there.
Was it John Leo?
I don't know.
John Leo. He was a great help to me. The only thing, I did not have a room that was, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't accessible for a person like me, but John was very, very helpful, very polite, very understanding, and we just did our thing anyway, went out to dinner and did what we had to do.
We did.
Michelle
It was
was great
fun.
company. I just enjoyed it.
So Michelle, I understand how David and John are connected, but Michelle, how are you connected to these two guys?
John and I are married. We work for the same agency with different departments. With John being the advisor of the North Country Self Advocates, I help him with his self-advocacy meetings and attending conferences. And that's how I got to know a lot of the self-advocates that I didn't work with in DAHAB. And just being around David all the many years that I've been around him was how I got to know David and support him. The little that I do, mostly it's John supporting David. David's my friend, so we hang out that way.
Right.
Nice. What a good friend to have.
Definitely.
And Michelle, I'm going to go back to you. You're the person who wrote the article with, David and John's help. But will you tell the listeners about the article and what you learned or realized when you were writing it?
I knew it was going to be hard capturing David. I knew, everything that David had already done prior to his retirement, but I didn't know a lot about the planning stages. So I learned a lot talking to John and David together, and John will tell you about that, I'm sure. But I knew David he's a great self-advocate, and I knew that he knew what he wanted to do when he retired and speak up for himself and to do what he wanted to do. And I knew, like I said, it was going to be hard capturing David being the great man that he was, and I thought I'm not going to be able to do it. I think I even said that in the article that I wouldn't be able to do him justice. But I just saw a different part of David, part that I didn't know leading up to his retirement, and just, he had it planned out. He knew what he wanted to do and what he didn't want to do, and he and John talked about that and made that happen.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Let's talk about that, David. How did you approach your plans for retirement, and how did John support you with that?
Well, when I realized that I was planning on retiring, John and I sat down and I talked with him a little bit about things that I wanted to do, what I felt I really, well, the things, that were really important to me. And I ended up wanting to become a catechist in the Catholic Church because I am Roman Catholic. And so I went to school in my diocese of Ogdensburg, and not the hospital, but the city of Ogdensburg. And I was able to finish. I took 4 courses only to learn that in 2002, I was the teacher of the year. Well, I learned today from my supervisor, I just came from their teaching. And I found out that I've been chosen, if I choose it, to go to Steubenville, Ohio, to the Franciscan Theological Seminary, to take a couple courses, and then I would finish up. And so I told my supervisor, I'd think about it, but I really would like to. So that was good news.
Mhm.
But they also offer it in other areas too, so we'll see what happens with that. But
So is that role a teacher of catechism, or what do you do in that
yeah,
role?
it's teaching people with developmental disabilities and people like myself to know about God, to know about their spiritual world, and the way that we're doing it now, we have gone from like 5 people to 35. And I think part of it is because our agency agreed to let them use their facilities. So we have this big room that we're in, and then they have other little areas where they can do art projects. And I need, even believe it or not, I'm teaching art. We have plays, we do different things, and so that's one of my interests.
Yeah.
The other thing I like to do is I like to go shopping or eat out once in a while. I like to go downtown and just browse around.
Mhm.
Um, I I've gone from a computer to an iPad and found that the iPad has helped me a great deal. And so I feel very good with that.
Sounds good. Sounds like you're doing a lot of the things that you would like to do in your retirement. Um, John, can you talk about when you were supporting David to kind of come up with his plan, what that process was like, and um, yeah, how you guys did that?
Sure. So being David's friend and I was a supervisor, David's last role at our agency, he was employed as a full-time self-advocacy consultant. So we paid him to do self-advocacy work about 15 hours a week. And he would, email and advocate at the state and national level and things like that. And David was 63, 64, and he came to me one day and said, John, between my pacemaker and my health, I don't want to overdo it. I think I'd like to stop. So I said, oh, David, are you giving me your notice? And he said, yeah, I think I am. So at that time, David lived independently with no supports, no outside help, no DSP or coming into his house. There's mostly natural supports at that time. So I went over to his apartment one day with a piece of paper and we just sat and talked and had coffee together. And I said, David, after you're done working it, let's consider this, how your income may be reduced and you're active on so many different boards. What do you want to scale back so you can slow down? So we talked about which boards he wanted to remain on and which ones he wanted to resign from. And we looked at his budget together, and then he brought in a few other people to look at his budget and where he maybe could cut spending because his income might be reduced a little. And we just we had a long talk, and then after that, every week we would talk about it more before he actually did retire. And David wanted to pursue something called self-directed services.
Yes,
And he hired his own staff and interviewed a few staff, and his staff, Virginia, has been with him now. How long has she been with you, David?
she has been with me for 7 years.
7 years.
8 on the 20th of March.
Wow.
8 years in March. So we want to make sure, David and I together want to make sure he was safe in his home to
Mhm.
remain living independently. And to do that, he needed a little bit more help as he aged. So we talked about that and we implemented the plan and it's working out great. Couple of things David said in that initial meeting is he didn't want to sit around all day in a rehabilitation program or in a nursing home setting or a senior citizen setting.
Mhm.
He wanted to be active in his community, but on his own timetable. And that was important. So we made sure he wasn't enrolled in any program, that anything he did was on his terms. And he's kept it that way for 10, 12 years now.
And I'm finding even with the new medical condition that I have, listening to my physical therapist has helped me a great deal. And I'm able to live with arthritis, even though it can be very painful. I can smile. I can do anything I want to do. I just have to find other ways of doing it.
I remember from those early meetings that we had planning David's retirement, that remaining independent in his own home was a priority. And
It was.
he's still, David, do you mind telling us how old you are?
I turned 79 on September 6th, and they didn't think I was going to live to be 4.
So for a 79-year-old
You told them.
adult with IDD to still be living independently, no one living with them, and as minimal supports, we're just very, very proud of David for leading the way and showing other people how it can be done.
The only thing I fear a little bit, but I'm not worried about it, I'm not going to let it get in my way, is I did find out the other day at a eye exam that I have retinitis pigmentosa, and there is no cure for that. And I've lost one eye. My right eye is now totally blind. My left eye, I have 20/400 vision, which is very poor. But I do have Braille. And so I decided I wanted to take a course in certified Brailing to be a certified Brailleist. Well, it took me 3 tries to do it. And the third time, Mrs. Dorff at the National Alliance for Braille at the International Library there in Washington, D.C., the Library of Congress, said, David, I have to pass you for 2 reasons. You got a 98 on your exam, but also your attitude and the way that you handled yourself was great. You did not give up. I'm going to pass you. And so I was given 2 Braille books that I was to study. I sent them back, and she sent them back to me telling me, no, they're yours. You earned them. And so now I have them.
Congratulations. I think Braille would be hard to learn, but I'm really impressed that you know it.
Well, I'll tell you who my hero is Helen Keller. I have the movie, The Story of My Life by Helen Keller, and I didn't know that she wrote the book. And I was very impressed with her in that she had a difficult childhood, but she didn't let that stop her. And so I was very impressed.
Yeah, she's quite a woman. She was very determined. Since you kind of originally made the plan and the pre-planning, when you talked about that really struck me as it's such an important piece of, talking about what are finances going to look like? What's, what do you have available, and are things going to change financially? But then also, who are your people resources? What are those natural supports you're going to continue to have? And what are those things you want to continue to do? Sometimes I think there's some assumptions that, especially for people with disabilities, that they'll just sit home and do nothing. And that is not how life should be or has to be. So I'm really glad, David, that you're talking about this and sharing your story about how active you are. And my gosh, being 79 and being so active is just really inspiring.
Well, I have team meetings with my counselor, twice a year, sometimes a little more. And I have chosen John as my person of support who comes to my meetings, and he is allowed to take part in the meeting. I also have Jenny and my dad. He does it by phone. And what I do is I talk about what I want. And I don't think I've told John this yet, but I'm going to. At every meeting, they would read my past, and I finally had a flashback, if you know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't handle it, and I started to cry, and I really was upset. And I said, I don't want to hear that anymore. I've heard that all my life. I can't live it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I left the room. And that was enough for them to decide as a team that that was not healthy for me, that I needed to move on with my life. I wanted it to be positive. And I said, when you read a book, don't you read a chapter, then go on to the next? That's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that impressed the team so much that that's what Lori did. She took it out of context so that I don't have to hear it anymore. If they want to read it, that's fine, but I don't want it.
Good for you for speaking up and telling them. Super important. John, what would you say, David, what would you say to other people who are thinking about retiring, and they don't know what to do or where to start? What would you advise them to do?
Are you talking to me or John?
You first.
Well,
David.
First of all, I would hope that they would have some kind of a plan in mind before they retired so that they weren't idle and bored. And then second, don't be afraid to talk to those that you trust, people that are staff. Like I had a lot of confidence in Michelle, and so I would talk to Michelle and tell her how I felt and that I would listen, but I wanted to make sure that what I was planning made sense. And I found that I would rather do that than try to just sit around and not do anything. And I'm not a person to sit in front of the radio or TV all day. I'd rather be doing stuff. And so I find stuff to do. And I just find life very interesting. Even if I go and take a walk or go downtown or, something like that. And I've made friends where I live and they accept me as a person. And I just feel that that's the way I feel about the way that my life has grown. And I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Michelle or John, what would you add if you knew somebody was thinking about retiring? What would you advise them?
I would try to listen to what they said, and I would give them good advice, hoping that they would take it, explain why I felt the way I did, and encourage them to try new things. Let's say it didn't work and they wanted something different. Well, I would say to them, we'll try it first. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, at least you tried it. and you knew that maybe it wasn't for you.
Good advice. Good advice. I'm going to pass that same question to Michelle and John.
I would say something very similar as to what David just said. Listen to what the person wants, what they want their future to look like. And I would ask them and hope for them that they had somebody like John who could help them plan what they wanted to do next.
I would tell the person to think about, to ask their support team to think about things that didn't occur to them. Two things that I worry about David in retirement are loneliness and safety in the home. So if I don't talk to David, regularly, at least once a week to make sure that he's safe and not lonely, somebody else would. For example, if I was out of town for a couple of weeks, I would talk to maybe one of my friends and say, hey, could you just mind giving David a call on a Tuesday afternoon or a Tuesday night, just to chat with him for a few minutes. And also, I every time I talk to David now, and even prior to retirement, I always ask him about, have you had any falls, or are you things that happen in his apartment when no one is there but him? I want to know what, I'm curious to, are you sleeping okay? Things that no one would know but him. I always make sure that he's engaged in letting me know how he's feeling. I know he has a full-time DSP to worry about that, but as a natural support, and his friend, I want to hear it from him, not just from people that are paid to support him.
Yeah. Since you made kind of an original kind of retirement plan, do you guys reassess it on a regular basis or talk about it, kind of make those tweaks? And how does that all work?
Well, when David first retired, he wanted to pull back from pretty much everything, except for being on the board of directors of our local agency, and he remained on the board of directors of our local independent living center. And that's what he did. He pulled back from all the boards, the NADSP activity and a lot of self-advocacy activity in Albany. David, he just slowed down. But curiously, Chet, about 5 years ago, David, we did reassess, and David said, I think I'd like to start going to conferences again, like I used to.
Yeah.
So we did. We went to Atlanta, and then Cleveland, and then Buffalo. And David,
He's been to Albany.
he re-engaged with his friend Joe Macbeth, and he's stayed in touch with Joe. And so yes, we reassessed, and now he's doing more than he did initially in retirement.
Yeah. So when you say you went to Cleveland and you went to Buffalo, those were the NADSP conferences, correct?
David went as a guest of Joe to Cleveland, Ohio, to an NADSP national conference, and then to Buffalo just a few months ago. I think David was still on the board during the Atlanta conference, but
I was. Yeah.
And how did it feel going to those conferences, David?
It felt very good. The first one that I went to in Buffalo was a lot different than the one I just came from, but it was because my Aunt Colleen lived in Buffalo, and she happened to be at home that time and had learned that I was coming to Buffalo. And so my dad sent her a picture of me because she'd never seen me, only in pictures, and said, David's going to be there, look for him. Well, they told me, Dan Flanagan brought me and told me that you're going to have a special guest at the board watch for. And I thought, how the blame me, I'm going to watch for somebody they don't know. Well, all I did is have to hear her voice, and I knew where she was. So I ran down to her and I go, Aunt Colleen. I ran over to her and hugged her, and that was a blessing.
What conference? That was not NADSP. What conference was that for? That early? That
was the New York State Self-Advocacy Conference.
Yes, state conference many years ago, before I knew you.
Actually, it was a national one.
It was a national. It was a SABE, wasn't it?
Yeah.
SABE, Self Advocates Becoming Empowered. It was a national self-advocacy conference many years ago.
It was really touching to me because
I had never heard that story.
I just felt so illuminated. And in fact, I talked with her yesterday. And she goes on trips a lot. She hasn't given up yet. She goes on trips. Um, she used to be a counselor for the developmentally disabled of Massachusetts. It's called Advocates Empowered. And it's a really good agency. I went there once and met their executive director, Ed Pilecki, and I really was fascinated by all I learned.
Oh, what a
And
great experience. I'm so glad you got to connect with her in that way and that she's still in your life. David, could you tell me, because we're hoping that there are direct support professionals or DSPs who are listening to this podcast, what are the things that, Michelle and John do as your friends that really help support you to live out your retirement the way you want to live it?
Well, the thing with John is if he sees something that could be detrimental or, maybe not the best, he, in a nice way, will suggest looking at it a different way. He doesn't discourage me. He encourages me to try new things. And I have found that, like I said, I don't really have time for loneliness. I feel that I'm busy enough. And sometimes I find music to be very helpful to me. I love listening to the radio. I have a tape player. I enjoy different things. And I just find that the way that I live really suits me like a new suit. And so I just feel good about it.
That's a great analogy. I'm glad your new suit fits you well. John and Michelle, what tips do you have for DSPs who are maybe newer to the field and haven't supported someone to kind of start looking at retirement or in retirement? What tips would you give them?
With everything, all the work that a DSP does with anybody is just listen to them, what they want and what they don't want, and just be there for support and help them get the things and achieve the things that they want to do. It might not be a comfortable conversation, but you're their support person. So listen to them and see what they want to do and try to make it happen for them.
Thanks, Michelle.
I think retirement is something that a person achieves, and it's like the pot at the end of the rainbow. So if I were a new DSP or a DSP that's been in the field for a long time, I would remind them to personalize the conversations with the older adult that you're supporting, and understand that all services should be person-centered, but retirement should really be about the person and what the person expects out of the last 20 or 30 years of their life, what they want to do and the pace they want to do it. A DSP supporting an adult that possibly lives in a group home or an IRA, and that person goes to a day program or is employed, is different than when the DSP is supporting maybe someone that's not as active. So the DSP should maybe think about how they interact with their own grandparent or how they interact with their own older adult family members, and just translate that to the person they're supporting. I would also suggest to the DSP to be even more focused on things like healthcare and safety, because healthcare and safety are more important to a person in their 70s than they are to a person when they're in their 30s or 40s.
So this question is for all three of you. Is there anything else that you would want the listeners, direct support professionals, and frontline supervisors to know or to think about when it comes to retirement and aging, really. What's important for them to keep in mind?
I would encourage if you're supporting an adult that's going into retirement or is has already retired, I would just tell the DSP or the support person to listen, be aware of any mild changes in ambulation, or look out for injuries that maybe the person doesn't know how they got the injury. Just be aware of any small changes in the person to make sure that they still don't need any extra supports, because for all we know, David may need more supports come March or sometime in the middle of next year. So you just gotta always pay attention to the person and make sure they're still enjoying their retirement.
Yeah, and say something when you see those changes happening, because as we get older, our bodies do change. And there might be areas where we need support, as you said, maybe 3 months from now that we don't need today. And sometimes the DSP is the person, oftentimes they're the person who sees it, sees that change. So communicating it and making sure the person gets the supports they need is really super important.
Yes.
Same thing, like similar to what John said, what I said earlier, just listen to the person you provide support to, see what it is that they want in the future from their retirement, and support them in that. And if you are the person who are retiring, you deserve to be enjoying your retirement. So make sure you speak up and say what it is you really want to do and what you want it to look like David did. Have a plan and speak up for yourself, advocate for yourself, what you want that to look like, and make sure it happens.
Yeah, because it's your life.
And don't ever be in a hurry. Things take longer with older people, and that's okay. That has nothing to do with having a disability or being visually impaired. All of us slow down. So maybe a young DSP or a middle-aged DSP should understand things move slower when you're in your 70s. And that's okay.
And that's okay. That's natural. Yeah. And what I would say to that is, if you can go back to the issue of Frontline Initiative on supporting people as they age, there are several stories that DSPs share about how they are supporting people as they get older. And many of them have served people for many years. And they talk about some of those nuances that they've seen and how they've adapted. I'm particularly thinking of the story that Tom Heaton wrote about supporting a man in his retirement and as he got older. But there are other stories as well. So thank you very much, everybody. This was really fun to talk with you. And gosh, maybe we'll do another interview in a year or so just to see how David's doing.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd be up for that. What about you, David? Would you be up for a revisit in a year or so?
Sure.
Thanks for joining the conversation. If you would like to reproduce all or part of this podcast, please email frontline-dsp@umn.edu.
Our show is co-produced at the University of Minnesota's Institute on Community Integration by Frontline Initiative co-editor Chet Cheddar and ICI Technical Director Pete McCauley. Skylar Mihailov is our editor. Graphic designers are Connie Burkhart and Sarah Kurtner. For more information on the Institute on Community Integration and all of our products and projects, please visit ici.umn.edu.